Audio by Nightfawn. Please do not repost or republish my work. Thank you and enjoy. 2 weeks after the end of the world, I went looking for you. And across deserted highways, empty shopping malls, dilapidated housing filled to the brim with shivering squatters like a clown car on the brink of bursting, I finally found you. It took you a while to recognize me, and that's okay. I didn't ask to be like this, you know? I know what you're thinking. You've changed, or you're not that girl that I used to know anymore, and yeah, that's kinda technically true, but I'm still the same on the inside. Well, maybe not my insides, but I still think like I'm me. Still the same girl you fell in love with all those years ago. You were my whole world. You still are. So, when I found you there, fending off dozens of reanimated corpses, I didn't even hesitate. I just sprung into action. Although it probably helped that I didn't really need to worry about getting bitten anymore, or anything. And sure, maybe I got a slower start than I was hoping for, but we got there in the end. I still made sure you were safe. I'll always protect you. No matter what. Remember that one birthday like a year ago, when I'd finally gotten one over you and planned a surprise party without you knowing? Yeah, I was always a bad liar, so you'd always been able to see through my plans days in advance, but that year was the year. The way your eyes widened, your jaw dropped as we all jumped out from behind our mismatched thrift store living room. But then the way your face lit up in happy recognition immediately after as you realized what was happening. I knew those eyes. The honey-sweet warmth touching the corners when you finally picked me out of a crowd. I missed that. I missed you. So much. But there was something different, too. I was different now. You were different now. The color drained from your face as realization set in. For a moment, I probably looked no different from the creatures I was fighting. Gray-green skin torn and bruised in places, hair disheveled and hanging limp across shoulders hunched in animalistic rage. Please don't look at me like that. Please remember me as I was, not the me standing before you right now. Please. When all was said and done, there was silence, except for your hitched breathing and the frantic beat of your pulse. I could smell the blood on you. It gnawed at my psyche and whispered at me to do things I would regret, but I could never do that to you. I would never do anything to hurt you. I took a step forward. You scrambled 3 paces back. Shouted at me to stay away. Shouted at me to please not come any closer. I know what you are. I know what you want. I know what you'll do. In a way, I was thankful that I still had feelings left to hurt. They helped me focus. I moved closer, limbs stiff with rigor mortis, shambling in unison towards you. I always thought the whole slow zombie thing was a cliche, and if I could still laugh, I honestly would have at the whole situation. Unfortunately, I think my throat was a little too mangled to make anything that could come close. Finally, your back hit the wall, and I stood above you. I forced myself to sit, but it looked more like I just fell on my ass. My legs splayed out in front of me. I tilted my head, and you tilted yours. I wanted to tell you it was all right. That I wouldn't hurt you, that I missed you so goddamn much. I came all this way to find you. And I knew I would find you. You shakily held out your knife to me and let out a breath. Told me you wouldn't be afraid to end it here if you had to. But even if it all ended here, I would be thankful to end on your terms, rather than to some random roaming survivor. And I wanted to make sure you knew that. I leaned forward until the tip of the blade pressed against my forehead, eyes never leaving yours. I don't know how long we stayed like that. It could have been 5 minutes, it could have been 5 eternities, but time passed like trying to run through water. Eventually, you lowered your hand, let the knife fall and clatter beside you. You mused that this must all just be a dream, and for a little while I agreed with you. For all I knew, this could have all just been a random nightmare, and any minute now I was going to wake up in our bed and open my eyes to see your sleeping face and be able to feel your warmth next to me. I wished it to be true. I willed with all my heart that it was. My eyes stung, and I marveled at the feeling of tears welling up in them and streaming down my face. I didn't think I could still do that. Your fingers instinctively reached out to wipe them from my face. Pure muscle memory that overrode your survival instincts. Then you froze. Held your breath. Waited for the feeling of rotting teeth sinking in the soft flesh of your arm. The voices in my head screamed for it, demanded the gushing lifeblood that thrummed just under the fragile surface of your skin, but I held them at bay. I let myself imagine the warmth of your touch on my face. Tried to remember how it used to feel and smell when I could do those things before. Heightened smell and an endless numb void. I leaned my head against your hand and closed my eyes. I let myself get swept away to different places. We were at our first apartment, on the couch, snuggled together under the blankets after I came home in tears. I'd just been let go from my job at the time, and you were immediately there, holding me, lips pressed against my temple, warm hand brushing away my tears. We are on the floor in the kitchen, your head on my lap, 3 empty wine bottles at our feet as we talked about all the places we wished we had been and all the things we'd regretted, but we knew it was okay because it all happened so we could be together. Here. In this moment. You cry about it, and then I cry because you're crying, but it's okay. Because at least we can feel this stuff together, and it's not like we have work in the morning. We're at the park, buzzing with excited energy because we'd finally gotten some time off work and we'd both been so busy for so long. And I can clearly see the tiny box in your pocket, but I'm not saying anything so I don't ruin the moment. And I can hear you rehearsing the words when you think I'm not listening, and you're fidgeting with your keys and your phone and bouncing nervously when we stand beside the lake to watch the swans in the distance. And I mean, yeah, sure. We talk about it before, but it was different. This was different. This was it. This was finally happening. And from the corner of my eye, I see you turn and take something out of your pocket, and I hold my breath and close my eyes to steady my heart. I feel a hand close over my wrist. And suddenly, my world turns upside down. Or was it just me? I hear the splash as my body breaks the surface of the lake. I feel the sting of water hitting my eyes, flooding my lungs, muting my gasp of surprise. On the surface, I see you turn confused until the realization hits and you look down into the lake. I feel more hands close around my ankles, my wrists yanking me deeper and deeper into the inky depths. It's funny. I must have seen this lake 1,000 times over. Passed by it on my way to work, to the mall, to run errands, but now it felt like I had been transported into a whole different world. All this time, I saw what was on the surface, and I never really thought about what could have been lurking in the depths below. I felt like I'd been sucked into a sensory deprivation tank. All I could see was the dimming lights on the surface. All I could hear was my erratic pulse, but then suddenly there was something new. Pain blossomed like fireworks all around me. It felt like dozens of pinpricks all over my body. I thought for a moment that this is just what drowning feels like. This must be what dying feels like. But then I look down and I see them. And for a moment, I think that I must be hallucinating, that the dark must have just been playing tricks on my eyes. At least 5 figures were latched onto me, one having just bit a chunk from my leg. I bucked and kicked and screamed as hard as I could. I managed to get 3 off me, but like the other 2 were more resolute. One locked eyes with me, moved up closer to me. It looked like he was about to kiss me until he sank his teeth into my throat. I clawed at his face, sank fingers into the jelly of his eye sockets until his grip slackened and he floated away. I focused on the last one, too preoccupied with ripping and tearing at my abdomen. I pushed past the pain, let the adrenaline wash over me as I gripped his head, fingers pushing into the soft, sagging flesh under his jaw. I hooked my legs on his shoulders and pulled as hard as I could. More water flooded my lungs, and every inch of me hurt, but I didn't care anymore. I pulled, used more force than I'd ever used in my life, and when finally I felt a pop, suddenly, I was rolling and tumbling through the water. I couldn't tell what was up and down. I didn't know, and I found it increasingly harder and harder to care. The only thing that kept me going, that still keeps me going, is that you might have been on the surface looking for me. So scared and confused. I forced my aching body to kick and find the surface. And when at last I finally broke through, I coughed and sputtered, eyes desperately trying to search for your familiar form. I saw you, getting swept away in the crowd. I saw the panic and fear in your eyes, saw your fingers grasping at the air. It was all you could do to try and fight against all the people running away. For a moment, time seemed to stop. I couldn't hear anything around me except for my ragged, wheezing breaths as I clawed my way to shore. I wondered at the almost solid mass of panicked bodies, fleeing as far away from the lake as they could get. And then I saw why. Dozens, if not hundreds of masses were crawling out of the murky depths of the lake along with me. I'd seen fake drowning victims on TV shows and movies before. I remember how we used to talk about them and remark about how unrealistic the portrayals were to each other, but how were we to know what the real thing was supposed to look like? These things looked almost alien. The way their bodies were bloated, fading, glassy eyes focused on nothing and everything at the same time. Water streamed off of them, and a strange green algae-looking slime dripped from open orifices, exacerbated by every movement. Some had no lower halves and dragged themselves out of the water with gnarled hands, some missing fingers. Others got up onto unbalanced legs, shambling towards the mass of people. Everywhere around me, more and more were emerging from the water like ants pouring out of an anthill. I was afraid for a moment that I would get caught again and dragged back into the waiting hungry waves, but the creatures were more focused elsewhere. Some people who were too slow found themselves suddenly pinned down by dozens of rotting corpses, all hissing and popping joints, rotting teeth, greedy hands sinking into soft flesh like hungry children trying to scoop as much candy into their mouths as they could fit. The smell of blood and other viscera filled the air, trickled down the cobble paths and well-manicured grass down into the waiting lake. Almost as if it had been waiting this whole time. More and more corpses crawled out from beneath its depths. Those who had once been pinned down and feasted on now came back as the same creatures that had killed them, albeit drier and more mobile since their bodies were yet fresh in death. You were farther now. I'm not even sure you saw me come out of the water, but my eyes locked on your rapidly shrinking form, and I reached a hand out. Tried to call out to you, but my throat had been too mangled, and it all just came out as an ugly, warbled shrieking sound. To my left, a corpse had taken notice of my plight and tried to make its way to me, but the other creatures had ripped off all his limbs and were now greedily feasting on them. Still, he wriggled like a pale maggot, hissing and clicking his jaw open and closed. And for a moment, I thought I saw my future laid out before me. I wouldn't become like that, would I? No, I'm not dying in a place like this. I had to find you first, and then we'd be able to figure this out together. Together. I opened my eyes once more, looking up now at your weary face. At least you weren't trying to kill me anymore. Slowly, I tried scrawling a message out on the ground with the blood covering my hands. At least ripping those corpses to shreds had done me some good. You know? It felt like I was back in preschool, trying to write words with my jumbo crayon. Still, me. I wrote in barely legible letters. You read it out with a shaky voice, and I nodded. And all at once it felt like the weight of the world was falling off my shoulders. I had finally found you. We were finally reunited.